how do we build ethical leadership into the company? I worked in a lot of industries and a lot of companies, and I saw a lot of value statements, and they were on the website, and there might be a poster on the wall, but that wasn't the reality. I mean, it was almost a joke. It was a platitude. These are the values we operate by here. Everybody knows the Enron story. They had all these values, and now they're a joke. You can buy the Enron Values Cube on the internet. How do you take them from just being posters on a wall, which is what it was for so many years, while at the same time making sure, as we said before, that we make our numbers, our financial targets?
You got to make it. You got to make it real. You got to take those value statements off the wall and translate them into real life situations for the employees to understand.
What does that mean, Andrew?
We heard it before with Rick, which is, you know, some of the training and the reinforcement that goes on around real situations that
in your industry,
industry that the employees can relate to, and the light bulb comes on. I don't want to fly in the face of the positive reinforcement message we talked about before, but enterprise justice does count as well. When people overstep beyond that boundary of the ethical standards you expect in your organization, quick, consistent action needs to take place. People need to know where that boundary is and the consequences of stepping over.
The consequences are being you have to terminate some people.
Absolutely.
Potentially. It's one of the options that's there.
And how do you terminate somebody for an ethical violation and still have the privacy and not get sued? And you know, how do you send that message out that this is what we have to do because somebody made their numbers by stepping over the boundary, but you can't really say it all?
Often it gets known.
It gets known. People
without
know.
broadcasting it or put it on the.
You don't have to put a press release out and say.
And I always take the moment to remind the team about a certain policy.
Okay. Let me just coincidentally remind you about this policy.
that gets enough attention without getting into the specifics. The other thing is measuring it. If it's not measured, it's not managed. And there are ways, quantified and soft measurements as well, to check how an organization is standing behind its ethical standards.
What kind of measurements do you have in mind?
Check around certification. We talked about people doing the training. Check around when we've had internal audit and they've come in and identified risk. Have we completed those mitigation plans that we set on time?
Excellent.
Number of incidents and violations we have in certain policies. Is it homing you down to a particular risk area?
So you're really taking a metrics approach to looking at all this, and people know that you're looking at it.
Surveys that we hand out.
Surveys of employees, yeah. Excellent.
Let me add some interesting stats we use. We survey, employee surveys. We also run our metrics. I mentioned we have 60 ethics folks. We actually measure the kind of reporting that goes on, right? So for instance, if we have anonymous reporting, we don't like that. And we actually watch that metric. We want it to taper near zero, and we're doing pretty good. It's pretty close to zero. We started our programs years ago. It was not. The other thing we look for is consultation or guidance. If employees are calling our ethics team and asking for advice on something, they saw this, we consider that very good, which would prevent maybe something that would be a real violation. We'd have to do an investigation and have disciplinary action. And yes, we do everything from warnings, letters, time off without pay, to termination. And the higher up in the company you go, your standards you're held to a much stricter standard. And we do pick our leaders by those standards that drive to those standards and behave to those standard values.
One of the hardest things you confront is when some of your best performers behave unethically. And you've got to be consistent, and you can't let that impact your decision. If it is against the company's policy, regardless of their performance, you've got to adhere to what those policies are and take action, because otherwise it's sort of like the CEO I talked about earlier. Everybody's watching and everybody knows.
It's toxic.
Yeah, right.
So some of the things I'm hearing are, this is not something that can be delegated. It's senior leadership. Values, the persistence that you have to stay with this. It's just a cadence, a drumbeat. It needs training and support. It needs celebration and acknowledgement. It needs role modeling by the top people. It needs measurement, metrics. We take the things from the quality industry and we really say, how are we going to measure these kind of ethereal things? You build it into the performance reviews, and you have to be tough enough to separate the violators, even if they're the star performers.
Right. Well, one other attribute of this culturally is you have to create, take fear out of the system,
That's very important.
have transparency, because you need a speak-up culture so your employees can speak truth to power, right? You know, this is wrong. I saw this. And know that they can do that with no, concern of any retaliation or concern for their career. If anything, be celebrated and, right, be awarded.
Reward the messenger.
Reward the messenger. Yeah. A speak-up culture. I like that.
Right.
People feel empowered to do that because they know that this is what the senior management, the board, as you
The
talked
board.
about, the CEO, this is what they want.
Correct.
That's excellent. Excellent.